Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in someone else's personal life, not even if it's someone you love, especially then. If I had known how it would end, I would never have done it, and I'm warning you now, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and mine were no exception. My brother John was the reason I stepped in. He wasn't the kind of guy women noticed right away, not young, not handsome. He was soft around the edges, loved to eat, and you could tell. But what he lacked in looks, he made up for in kindness. He carried his women in his arms, never said no to them, gave them everything they asked for, and more. And what did he get in return? Nothing but heartbreak. Both his first and second wives betrayed him. The first ran off with a younger man, leaving him with a mortgage and an empty bed. The second cheated right under his nose, draining his bank account while she whispered lies in his ear. John didn't deserve any of it, but he trusted too easily, loved too deeply. And that's why it destroyed him. After his second marriage fell apart, he withdrew from the world. The laughter disappeared first, then the light in his eyes. He started staying home more, eating more, living less. And when loneliness took root, it began to eat away at him. I saw it happening, slowly at first, like a shadow creeping in. Then all at once, he started getting sick. Nothing serious, not at first. Headaches, stomach pain, stress, the doctor said. But I knew better. He was fading, and I couldn't let that happen, not to my brother. And so when I saw Lily sitting on that bench in Central Park, broken and lost, I didn't just see her. I saw him. I saw a chance to give him something he hadn't had in years, hope. It started on one of those damp, gray mornings, the kind where the air feels heavier than it should, and people avoid eye contact like they might catch your misery if they linger too long. I was power walking, pretending I cared about my cholesterol when I saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the pond, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold in something broken. Her hair stuck to her face, damp from the mist, and even from a distance I could see her shoulders trembling. I should have walked away. New York is full of sob stories, and I wasn't exactly a hero looking for someone to save, but something about the way she looked up, eyes red and hollow, froze me in place. "Hey, you okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. She flinched, like the sound of kindness was foreign to her, and then, just like that, the dam broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she buried her face in her hands. "No," she said, her voice small and broken. "I'm really, really not." I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down next to her, shoving my hands into my jacket pockets like that would keep me from getting too involved. "What happened?" I asked, bracing myself for some sob story. What I got was worse. Her name was Lily, 24, fresh out of some small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where trust wasn't a liability. She'd come to the city chasing love, or what she thought was love. A guy she met online, smooth-talking and sweet. He convinced her to move in with him, promised her the world. And then he used her, took advantage of her trust, her vulnerability. And when he had gotten everything he wanted, he threw her out like garbage. No warning, no explanation, just told her to leave and slammed the door behind her. He didn't even give her her things back. "I thought he loved me," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought he was different." I felt my stomach twist. Not because her story was new, but because it wasn't. I'd heard it before. I'd lived it through my brother John. Too soft for this world, too trusting. He never saw the knife coming until it was buried in his back. I wasn't about to let Lily become another victim. "Listen," I said, every instinct screaming at me to shut up. "You don't know me, but I can help you. I know someone who's been hurt too. He's a good guy, the best. And he's lonely as hell." Her eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I swallowed hard. "I'm saying, come with me, get cleaned up, eat something, stay at my place until you figure out what you want to do. No strings." She didn't hesitate, didn't even blink. She just nodded. And that was the moment I made the first mistake, the first lie, the first step down the road to hell. Over the next few days, Lily transformed. I took her shopping, bought her clothes, makeup, perfume. She cleaned up good, better than good. She was stunning in that innocent, fresh-faced way that made men forget how to breathe. And that's when I knew she was perfect for John, and I introduced them the following weekend. John was nervous, fidgeting like a kid on his first date, but Lily? She smiled at him like he was the only man in the world. And just like that, he was hooked. For the first time in years, I saw my brother happy, alive. He doted on her, showered her with gifts, and Lily soaked it all in. At first, I told myself it was gratitude. She was thankful, that was all. But then I noticed things. The way her eyes lingered on his wallet more than on him. The way she laughed a little too hard at his jokes, like she was trying to sell it. The way she always seemed to know exactly what to say to keep him under her spell. I told myself I was overthinking it, that she deserved a second chance, and John deserved happiness. I ignored the warning signs, buried them under good intentions, and that was the second mistake, because Lily wasn't broken. She was dangerous, and by the time I saw it, it was already too late, and John fell hard and fast. Within weeks, he was talking about forever, marriage, kids, a future that he'd given up on long ago. And Lily? She played her part flawlessly, sweet, supportive, everything he thought he wanted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started small. John mentioned a necklace Lily wanted, a gold chain with a diamond pendant. He bought it without hesitation, smiling like a man who thought he was winning. But I saw her face when he gave it to her, the way her eyes flickered, not with gratitude but calculation, like she was already thinking about the next gift. Then there was the money. John was always generous, too generous, but with Lily it was different. She had this way of making him feel guilty for saying no, like withholding anything from her was proof he didn't love her enough. And John, he bent over backward to prove himself. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips out of town. Little by little, his savings started to disappear. I tried to talk to him, sat him down one night, just the two of us. "John, you've got to slow down," I said. "You barely know her. What if she's not who you think she is?" He looked at me like I'd just insulted his entire existence. "You don't know her like I do," he snapped. "She's been through hell, and all she wants is to feel safe. I can give her that." I let it go. What else could I do? He was happy, or at least he thought he was. And after everything he'd been through, didn't he deserve that? But the feeling wouldn't go away, and then it happened. It was a Thursday. I was walking home from work when I spotted her. Lily. She was standing outside a cafe laughing. But it wasn't John she was with. It was another man, tall, well-dressed, and leaning in close, too close. I froze, watched as she touched his arm, let him tuck her hair behind her ear. My stomach dropped. I wanted to march over, to scream, to drag her home and show John who she really was. But I didn't. Instead, I waited. The next evening, I asked her about it, casually at first. "Have you had any contact with that guy? The one who hurt you?" I asked. Her eyes widened just for a second before she shook her head. "No." "Why would I? After what he did?" She sounded convincing, too convincing, but something in her tone, too smooth, too practiced, left me uneasy. Still, she leaned into John that night, resting her head on his shoulder as they talked about wedding plans. He was going to ask her to marry him, and I didn't know how to stop it, because even then, I didn't realize how far it would go, how deep her lies ran. Because Lily might not have been who she seemed to be. Or maybe I was wrong. There was something about her that didn't sit right. But was I just being paranoid? John proposed to Lily on a warm Sunday afternoon in the park, right by the same pond where I had first met her. It was romantic in the way John always was. Simple but heartfelt. He'd brought a picnic basket, laid out a blanket, and even had a bottle of champagne tucked away. I should have been happy for him, but all I felt was dread. She said yes, of course. She gasped, tears shimmering in her eyes, and threw herself into his arms. It was perfect. Too perfect. And when John slid the ring onto her finger, she looked at it like it was a key to something bigger, something she'd been planning all along. After that, everything moved fast. John was on cloud nine, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. He started talking about venues, caterers, and honeymoon destinations like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. And Lily? She played the part flawlessly. She gushed over dresses, tried on veils, and picked out flower arrangements like a woman who'd dreamed of this day since she was a little girl. But there were cracks, small ones, barely noticeable if you weren't looking. I was looking. For starters, she didn't have family, none. She said she'd grown up in foster care, bouncing from one house to another until she aged out of the system. It was believable, tragic even. John ate it up, vowing to give her the family she never had. But something about the way she told it didn't sit right. Her words were too polished, too rehearsed, like she'd told the story one too many times. Then there were the friends she claimed to have. She insisted they were like sisters to her, the closest thing to family she'd ever known. But when it came time to send out invitations, none of them had addresses. They move around a lot, she said, brushing it off. Artists mostly, free spirits. John didn't question it, not once. He just kept writing checks. Deposit for the venue, down payment for the honeymoon suite, designer shoes she just had to have. And Lily kept smiling, kept thanking him like he was her hero. But I noticed the way her eyes lingered on the price tags, the way her smile sharpened when he handed over his credit card. I tried to talk to him again. "John, are you sure about this?" I asked one night when Lily was out with her so-called friends. "I mean, really sure?" He bristled, his jaw tightening like it always did when he felt cornered. "Of course I'm sure. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." "But you hardly know her." He glared at me. "You're wrong. I know everything I need to know." There was no getting through to him. Not when he was like this. Not when he'd already made up his mind. So I backed off. Or at least I pretended to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, the way Lily dodged questions, the way her stories never quite added up, and the way she looked at John, not like a woman in love, but like a predator sizing up prey. I watched her closer after that, took mental notes. She was careful, too careful. But every now and then, she slipped. A phone call she quickly ended when I walked in. A shopping bag tucked into the back of the closet, full of expensive clothes with tags still on them. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I didn't have proof. Not yet. And without proof, all I had were suspicions. Suspicions that were starting to eat away at me. The wedding date crept closer, and Lily's mask stayed firmly in place. She was the perfect bride, sweet, loving, and devoted. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that it was all an act. That underneath the smiles and laughter there was something darker. I just didn't know what. The wedding day dawned bright and golden, as if the universe itself had blessed their union. The sun painted the sky in soft hues of pink and lavender, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming roses and freshly cut grass. Everything was perfect, too perfect. John was beaming, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. He couldn't stop grinning. Couldn't stop thanking me for bringing Lily into his life. As he adjusted his tie for the 5th time, he turned to me, his voice low and emotional. "I owe you everything," he said. "You saved me." My stomach twisted. I forced a smile, but my heart was pounding. I wanted to be happy for him. God, I wanted to believe this was real, but something gnawed at me, something dark and sharp that I couldn't shake. The ceremony was a dream. Lily walked down the aisle like a vision, her white dress trailing behind her like clouds. Her smile was radiant, her eyes shimmering with what looked like love. John's face lit up the moment he saw her, and for a second I almost believed it too. Almost. Friends and family cheered as they exchanged vows. Tears were shed when they said, "I do." And as they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. It should have been the happiest day of John's life. But then I saw him. The man, standing near the back of the bride's side, half hidden by the crowd. Tall, sharp-featured, and familiar. Too familiar. My blood ran cold. It was him, the man from the cafe. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribcage. What was he doing here? Who was he? My mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories, whispers of suspicion. And then, as the ceremony ended and the guests moved to the reception hall, I saw them together, Lily and the man. She was laughing, soft and intimate, and he was leaning in close, his hand brushing her arm. I couldn't breathe. My feet moved on their own, following them as they slipped away from the crowd and out onto the terrace. I stayed in the shadows, straining to hear, my pulse thundering in my ears. "You did good," the man said, his voice low but sharp. "But don't get sloppy now. We're almost there. Just keep him happy a little longer. Once the accounts are cleared, we disappear. No more cheap motels. No more scraping by. This is it, Lily. Our ticket to glory. Don't mess it up now." I felt the world tilt. My stomach lurched. I wanted to unhear it, to pretend it wasn't true. But their words hung in the air, sharp as knives. Lily's voice cut through my haze. "I know, but he's starting to ask questions. His brother, too. He's watching me. I can feel it." The man grabbed her arm. "Then make sure he stops. Distract him. Do whatever it takes. Just don't get cold feet now. You can't run, Lily. Not when we're this close." I stumbled back, my breath ragged. My hands trembled as the truth sank in. It was all a lie, every smile, every kiss, every whispered promise. She'd played him, played all of us. And John. John was blind to it all. I didn't know what to do. My heart felt like it was splitting in two. How could I tell him? On his wedding day? How could I destroy everything he thought he'd finally found? But how could I not? I paced the halls, sweat pooling at the base of my spine. My mind spun through every scenario, every possible outcome. If I told him, it would break him. But if I didn't, he'd lose everything. The reception was in full swing by the time I found him. He was glowing, laughing with Lily in his arms. He looked so happy, so alive. And it killed me. I pulled him aside, my voice trembling. "John, we need to talk now." He frowned, confused, but followed me into a quiet corner. "What is it?" I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. "It's Lily. She's not who you think she is. She's lying to you, cheating you. I heard her talking to another man, someone she's been seeing behind your back. They're planning to take everything." His face went pale. "What? That's insane." He shook his head, stepping back. "No. You're wrong. You have to be wrong." "I'm not. I saw them, John. I heard them. She's using you." For a moment he just stared at me, his expression twisting from confusion to anger, to something that looked a lot like fear. "You're lying. You're jealous. You've never liked her." "Because I knew. I knew something was off, and now I have proof. Please, John, don't do this. Don't let her destroy you." He staggered back, his breath ragged. And then, as if the weight of it all finally hit him, his shoulders slumped. "I need to see it," he whispered. "I need proof." And just like that, everything changed. We didn't know what would come next. All I knew was that the perfect day had shattered, and the pieces were sharp enough to draw blood. John didn't act immediately. He decided to wait and observe. Despite the weight of what I had told him, he couldn't bring himself to confront Lily right away. Instead, he chose to watch, hoping against hope that I was wrong. But during this time, Lily and her lover grew careless. The thrill of deception, combined with their celebrations and heavy drinking, made them forget caution. They started spending more time together, exchanging glances and whispers that grew harder to hide. The reception hall was still alive with music and laughter when John stepped outside for air. But as he passed by the restroom, he heard something, muffled voices, laughter, and then sounds that froze him in place. He pushed the door open and found them. Lily and her lover. They were locked in a passionate embrace, their intentions undeniable. John's world tilted. He staggered back, unable to process what he was seeing. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was reality, raw and cruel. When they noticed him, Lily screamed and fell to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She crawled to him, grabbing his hands, sobbing. "Please, John, I can explain," she cried. "He forced me. He manipulated me for years. I was his prisoner. I never wanted this, I swear." Her voice cracked as she begged, her hands trembling. "I loved him once, but it was sick. It wasn't real. I needed help. I didn't know how to escape. But I love you, John. Please believe me." John stood frozen, his face pale and unreadable. But the damage was done. The trust he had built, the love he had given, shattered like glass. No one believed her, not after everything, and as the weight of her words and lies crashed down on him, John clutched his chest. His breath hitched, and before anyone could react, he collapsed. A heart attack. Panic erupted, guests screamed, paramedics were called, but it was too late. John was gone. The aftermath unraveled like a nightmare. Lily inherited everything, John's money, his property, his life's work. And the man she had conspired with? He took what he could and vanished. But greed had its price. Year later, I learned the truth. Lily's lover had gambled everything away in a casino. All their plans for glory crumbled, leaving them with nothing. As for me, I was left with guilt that wouldn't let go. I had tried to save my brother, but in the end, I had failed him. And no matter how much I wanted to rewrite the past, I couldn't.